It is an American song, the inauguration of a president, the celebration of our form of government where, as the president was to later say, the transfer of power occurs peaceably and with gracious ceremony, and never, but never at the point of a bayonet. And this was a historic inauguration, not so much that it marked the beginning of Ronald Reagan's second term, or that hundreds of thousands of people swarmed into Washington, D.C., but because the weather, for either the first or the second time, historians were not really sure, the inaugural parade had to be canceled. It was a brutal Arctic front that sent Washington, D.C.'s temperatures plummeting to an all-time low. The city was frozen. A virtual tundra with ice-coated monuments, drifting snow, and a killer wind, which, as it swept down from Canada to the United States, killed over 163 people in its path. As often happens, there is a heartwarming story that replaces the numbness with a certain glow. In this special edition of Inside Brunswick Schools and Brunswick Today, a joint presentation of the city and the schools, we will present to you the very touching story of a group of spunky high school students backed by a newly united community who marched into Washington, D.C. despite the bitter cold, the annoying security, and the ultimate disappointment of all, the cancellation of the inaugural parade. They captured the hearts of a nation and brought pride and distinction to the community that they call home. This is the story of the Marching Blue Devils' trip to the 50th inauguration of an American president. It began months ago when Mayor Stan Umpleby, after watching the band perform, said that they should seek an invitation to the inauguration of either Ronald Reagan or Walter F. Mondale. The National Electric chose Reagan, and Umpleby, backed by Superintendent John Boyer, went to work. There was an initial disappointment, if you recall. The band was rejected in its first time when it asked to march in the inaugural parade. There were 40 units already in the inaugural committee said, more than double the 1980 inaugural. But this didn't stop the mayor. The mayor continued to lobby to get the band into the parade. And finally, just before New Year's, the invitation came. It said, on behalf of President Reagan, the inaugural committee wishes to extend an invitation to the Brunswick Marching Blue Devils to participate in the festivities. There was a thrill that spread throughout the school system because everybody remembered that just 2 years ago, this band was about to be disbanded because of the school's financial problems. Now it was to be there in Washington, D.C., along with other top bands in the United States representing this community. The trip itself was exciting but exhausting. Long overnight bus trips, sightseeing, short nights in cold rooms with cold showers. Yet, when the band played during the pre-inaugural pageant, they were alert, artistic, and crisp. They performed in front of majestic monuments. The pre-inaugural pageant was hosted by President Reagan and Vice President George Bush. There were several other bands present, but little did the Marching Blue Devils and these other band members know that when their brass and percussion filled the darkening Washington, D.C. skyline, they would be remembered in history as only the few bands that had the opportunity to play in the 1985 inaugural.
1, 2, 3, play!
Once the pageant was over, there was the inevitable sightseeing. And for the marching Blue Devils, there was plenty of it. They had already started earlier in the day with a tour of the FBI building.
Captured in Deerfield, Ohio, by Cleveland police officers and FBI agents. He was picked up without incident. So we'll have 2 replacements appearing shortly. He uses a series of cameras and will photograph the fingerprints, picks out these characteristics that you see lit up in the computer.
Their tour included the Capitol building, where their tour guide was Representative Donald Pease of the 13th District. He greeted the band at the steps of the Capitol building, wearing a blue parka, his face numb from the biting cold. In a rare privilege, Congressman Pease arranged for the band to visit the floor of the House of Representatives chamber, where he spoke on the legislative system. So attentive, so well-disciplined were the band members that Pease later remarked. And you had some comments about the students there at the end. Could you repeat those?
Oh, yes. I was very much impressed with the Brunswick students. We brought them into the House chamber. They were perfectly behaved the whole time. And while I was speaking to them, they were extremely attentive. And afterwards, they asked some very good questions. So I am very high on the Brunswick Blue Devils.
And the sightseeing continued. The Smithsonian Institute.
From the steps of the Smithsonian, the Brunswick band says,
Okay, now get up and walk a little bit. Get up and walk like it's your turn in line. Go on. Oh, sure, there it is. Stay down here. I don't know.
West View.
And we're here tonight with Mr. Wagner. Mr. Wagner, what do you think of the trip so far?
I think we're having a great time because everybody in Washington knows that we're here today.
Yeah. Keep going. Thank you, Brunswick. Thank you, Brunswick. What do you think the best part of this trip is so far? Be quiet.
I think the best part of this trip has been all the friendships that we've made here. A lot of us have gotten to know each other. And we've all met people from out of the state and
the Naval Academy.
And the Naval Academy.
Mr. Rose, what do you think of the trip so far?
Oh, I think it's fantastic.
How are your pictures coming along?
I hope quite well.
What's been the highlight of the trip for you?
Last night at watching the fireworks and so forth.
That was good, Ann. All right.
That was incredible.
I'm a guest speaker from the Brunswick Band, and we're here with some of our friends that we've made at Washington, D.C. Well, I'd like you to tell your name, and I'd like you to tell us what was your high point of this trip.
Oh, I'm David Meridian from Melrose, Massachusetts, and my high point of this trip was meeting this fabulous band. It was incredible.
The band stayed at a hotel that was halfway to Baltimore, more than 45 minutes away from the nation's capital. There, in the little time the students had to unwind, they did so. Sunday night, the students split into two groups, those supporting the Miami Dolphins and those rooting for the San Francisco 49ers during the Super Bowl, and they rallied their teams onto victory. Others, believe it or not, chose a swimming party at a nearby indoor pool. It was during this Saturday night R&R that the news that the parade was canceled swept through the Brunswick Band and the host of chaperones. It can't be, lamented one student. It figures, lamented another. We get a chance in a lifetime, and Washington, D.C. gets the worst weather in its history. It was a feeling of sadness. But yet there was a flicker of hope, because a call came from the inaugural committee, and Bob Neidlinger was invited to come down to a meeting of the parade committee. Two representatives of the band were dispatched down there, and it was at that point that we learned that President Reagan and Vice President George Bush were going to host a celebration the very next day at the Capitol Center, in which the President and the Vice President wanted to personally thank all of the parade units who had paid their way to come to Washington, D.C. for their efforts. All of the marching units, including Sheriff John Rebar of Medina County, were invited to Landover the very next day. But a feeling of emptiness tugged at all of the band members. After all, the community had raised a lot of money to send the band to Washington. This was too great an opportunity to spend without some symbolic display of the honor the band experienced for being selected to participate in the inaugural. Sure, it was cold. Frostbite was an ever-present threat. But if the moment presented itself, the marching Blue Devils were going to march, and many of them knew it. On Inauguration Day, January 21st, that moment came. The band wanted to see the location, 11th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue, where they were to be stationed during the parade. That was where they were to play Topaz for the president as he drove by en route to the Capitol for a swearing-in ceremony. Tim Taylor and Denise DeCenzo from Cleveland's Channel 8 had arranged to meet the band there, so that they could send a report back home about how the chilling cold had frozen the instruments, and indeed frozen the band out of the parade. Incredibly, the president drove by, so quickly that not everyone can get a glimpse. But those who did see the president and Nancy Reagan said that they were smiling and waving at the Brunswick marching Blue Devils. At that point, the march began. They marched toward the Capitol for a block and back. Nothing elaborate, nothing really spectacular, just a group of spunky band members who, as Peter Jennings of ABC World News Tonight said on national television, were not about to take no for an answer. And they decided to march anyways. The march indeed made national news. ABC News carried it, and telephone calls came in from all over the United States.
But many others could only sit on the sidelines and watch. The Brunswick, Ohio high school band, though, refused to take no for an answer and marched down Pennsylvania Avenue anyway.
They were determined to march, and
Parade or no, they were going to march.
They marched,
Pennsylvania Avenue.
and the president saw them.
Is that right?
As they were forming, the president came by and waved and on his way to the Capitol.
The thrills were not over. From there, it was off to the Capitol Center for President Reagan's official thank you to the parade units.
Despite the cancellation of the parade, is still very worthwhile and important. Because all of us together have been participants in a great miracle of modern history, the simple, peaceful continuation of power, ratifying the sovereignty of we the people. There has never been a transfer of power by bayonet in America. God willing, there never will. Jefferson once said, "How little my countrymen know what precious blessings they are in possession of, and which no other people on earth enjoy." Well, today we can rejoice that more and more people on earth are moving toward democracy. And we can rejoice that America, a nation still young compared to so many others, is the oldest, most successful republic on earth. Celebrate together the 200th anniversary of our Constitution. And what a day that will be for parades, not only in Washington, D.C., but all across our land. So, while we could not go through with today's festivities, we can celebrate in our hearts marks the continuation of this wonderful experiment of individual liberty and self-government. And we can give thanks that we remain today, as Abraham Lincoln said over 100 years ago, the last best hope of man on earth. God bless you all. Thank you all again. Have a safe day.
This edition of Inside Brunswick Schools was recorded by Doug Krupla, a Brunswick high school senior, and James Carter, cable facilitator for the city of Brunswick. Carter and Joe Wagner, the community relations coordinator for Brunswick Schools, produced the show. Brunswick Schools would like to thank WWS Television for their cooperation in this broadcast.